You are listening to Ask the Answers podcast. Join me, Adele, as I uncover the knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment the psychic world has to offer. Let's begin. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ask the Answers podcast with myself, Adele. And on today's show, we have the lovely psychic Yvette joining us. Hello, Yvette.
Hi, Adele. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you on the show today and to find out all about you and your experiences of the psychic world. And of course, with anything, we always sort of go back to the beginning of how it all began and, you know, how you've become the psychic you are today. Have you done this for long, being a psychic and being involved with the spiritual world?
Yeah, so I've been interested in it my entire life. So, like a lot of people, surrounded by stories, myths, magic, but kind of in the society that I grew up in, I just thought it was a story. I didn't think it was real. And then kind of maybe in my early 20s, I met somebody who was very interested in Western ceremonial magic. And he started showing me a few things and all these, just one synchronicity after the next, quite crazy synchronicities started happening. Around that time, I also went to go and see an astrologer. And I was just amazed at the sorts of things that she could tell, right the way up what was going on with my mother's parents and so forth, just by looking at my chart. Mm-hmm. So I started to think, actually, there's no ways this is just a story, it's real. So it was kind of in my 20s that I started to study it for myself as real.
Oh, lovely. I love astrology. I mean, I can't work it out myself, but I love it when people do talk about it. And something that, if people aren't too spiritual, it's something more that they can maybe understand or accept or, listen to a little bit more maybe.
Yeah, I think when I first started studying astrology, I was just amazed at what that astrologer could tell, but I didn't know if I'd be able to do it. So while I was studying, I asked the people that I was working with if they'd be my test cases for me. And there was one lady, she kind of rolled her eyes at me and she went, "Oh, okay." And she gave me the birth details of her 2 children, but she didn't tell me who was who. And then I just went away, I did their charts. And then when I could describe them to her and what was going on in their lives quite accurately, and I'd never met these people before, that was pretty amazing. And it was nice for me to be able to show that it is something that is real. And there's but I think the bigger thing about it, which is amazing, is that without a doubt it shows that we're connected to something bigger than just ourselves. So it's not so much about it's not so much as proving it, but just knowing that we're connected, I think is phenomenal.
I find it amazing that whether you're spiritual or not, everyone knows what their star sign is. So yes, we know what our star sign is, but what does that mean and how much more is there to it? It's not just, is it your sun sign is your star sign? Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Yeah. So your star sign is the sign that the sun happened to be in at the time that you were born. And yeah, we all know that thanks to the dailies that kept that part of astrology alive. But there is a lot more. There are so many different planets that each represent like a different archetype of the psyche. So, Mercury might speak to how you think. Your sun sign is what's in your heart. What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? But the way you think and communicate about them might be different. Your values might be different. The way you put your energy and your drive into what you're going for might be different. The kinds of luck that you attract might be different. Where you have areas of discipline and responsibility and delayed gratification might be different. And there's a planet for all of those. And they're in different signs, and the way they kind of all interact with each other, sometimes harmoniously, sometimes not so harmoniously, gives a much more rounded picture of the character. And it's quite exciting because I find, absolutely everything in the universe theoretically can be ruled by a planet and a sign. So it's not like you do your chart once for an hour and then you know it, because it shifts and it changes depending on the time that you're looking at it and what it is that you want to know. And if you think about like that hermetic axiom, as above, so below, it's kind of like as you're working on something with your own consciousness, or at least this is what I find, all of a sudden I'll discover a new asteroid and how that sits in my chart, or I'll see a different planetary interaction in a way that I've never seen it before. It's like as I change, my chart is changing. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, fascinating. And for some people who don't understand themselves and the way that they act, the way they communicate, you mentioned there that sometimes they might even be like in conflict with themselves because, like you said, one part of their chart, they might act in a particular way, but then, they communicate in a totally different way. And then it gets really confusing for people to understand them.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful to be aware of it. So say, for example, somebody with a Capricorn sun, they could have quite serious goals. They could be really serious about what it is that they want to achieve, but maybe they've got a Gemini moon. So they come across as being much more lighthearted, playful, they joke about it. And the people around them don't actually readily see how serious they are about it. So maybe there's something between their gravitas and what other people are recognizing. And I think when you're aware of that, you can work with it. And those things that are difficult for us, they're actually good things to have in our chart, because it's the difficulty that kind of spurs us on to kind of achieving, you work with it. There's like an alchemical process and you create something quite special with it. But I think that self-awareness really helps along the way.
How long does it take to do somebody's chart?
Oh, I mean, lifetimes. But I mean, you you can always give information that is useful in as much time as you've got. So I mean, if I looked at your chart, there'd be something I'd be able to tell you in 5 minutes. Lots of people might think that they can't have an astrology reading because they don't know what time they were born or something like that. We do need your birth date, so we absolutely do need to know the birth date. But with the birth date in 5 minutes, I can tell you something. With the birth date, time of birth, and 2 hours, I can tell you a lot more. But in general, for a first reading, kind of an hour to an hour and a half is a nice time to kind of comfortably sit down and get an overview.
Yeah. If somebody wanted just to have a little look themselves, what would be, say, 3 really good things or aspects to look at in their chart?
The main things, I'm going to go for 4. I'm greedy. You want to know, so everything that goes on inside of you has got 2 doorways through which you really interact with the outer world. So, and you need your birth time for this one. But those 2 doorways are your rising sign, that's sometimes called your ascendant. And that's how you first come across when somebody meets you, or, you might be familiar with the word persona. So that's your rising sign, how you come across when you first meet you. If you don't know your time of birth, I mean, it can be quite interesting to go to people who know you really, really well and ask them, what surprised you as you got to know me? What did you first think of me? And who am I really? And it's like those first impressions might give you an idea as to what your rising sign is.
Okay.
The other doorway is your midheaven. So the midheaven is the highest point in the sky that the sun was at on the day that you were born. So it's the most visible part of the chart. So what can people see or know about you long, long before they even meet you, before they interact with that persona? So the sorts of things we can Google about you on the internet or hear about through other friends, like what do you do for a living? Are you married? Are you single? It's your public status. So often it has to do, if people are interested in their careers, knowing what your midheaven is a good one to look at. So number 1, ascendant, number 2, midheaven, and then the other 2 would be the 2 luminaries, the lights in the heavens. They're the most personal parts of the chart. So that's your sun sign, and then also your moon sign, because the sun is kind of, the sun is your heart, it's your goal, it's what it is that you want to achieve in life. But the moon is sometimes referred to as your soul's purpose, or it's also your instincts, your behaviors, your feelings, your feelings. We're sensitive feeling beings. We want to know how we navigate that part of ourselves.
Okay, really interesting. Out of interest, what star sign are you?
I am Capricorn.
Okay. And what are sort of the traits of a Capricorn, just with the sun sign?
So just with the sun sign, so Capricorn would be, so it's an earth sign, so it's very interested. So everything that a Capricorn does, it wants it to have a tangible or a practical result.
Yeah.
They can be quite serious, quite determined, quite ambitious. They, there's a mountain that they want to climb and they want to get to the top. Symbolized by the mountain goat, if you've ever seen them kind of dancing from cliff to cliff. It can be the sort of sign where you work hard for something, but the real rewards, the real success, the real achievement comes later in life. So, I mean, we've all got Capricorn somewhere in our chart. We've all got Saturn, the planet that rules Capricorn somewhere in our chart, and that speaks to where we've got hard work, discipline, and maybe delayed gratification.
That relates to my brother as well. He's a Capricorn.
Yeah, I mean, Capricorn, every single sign and every single planet has got a gazillion different meanings to it. And they can have like their worst side and they can have their best side. And we probably play with different, we put on those different sides of them at different times in our life. And Capricorn, the worst side of Capricorn could be that they're too concerned with status. They care too much about what other people think about them. It is that 10th sign of the zodiac. So it's how the world sees you at large. So, a real respect for authority, but that can mean that because they care about authority and what other people think, they're doing what they're told rather than what's in their own heart. But the highest expression of Capricorn is, you get to the top of that mountain, you become the master, and then you're listening to your own authority.
Yeah. How does that sync in with, I mean, two questions. One, can you be an astrologer without being a psychic? Or does it come hand in hand? And also, if you can be a psychic with obviously working with astrology, does that make you question it more, the psychic world?
Sorry, say the last part again.
So being psychic, have you, obviously, because of the interest of the astrology, does that make you question the psychic world more? Do you want to see, being a Capricorn, has it made you want to see more proof with the astrology side?
That's a good question. So the first thing I would say is whether or not you can be an astrologer without being a psychic. I would say every single human being has got, we're all intuitive. To a greater or a lesser degree. It's this idea that we can ever really be an objective scientist, and we're not bringing all our experience, all our preconceptions, all our hunches. I mean, if you look at the history of some of our greatest scientists, they'll say that they got their breakthroughs during their dreams or something like that. And I think, we all have intuitions very, very quickly, so quickly that we don't even realize we're having a lot of these intuitions. So to a greater or a lesser degree, we are all intuitive and psychic. What astrology does is it kind of gives you a frame to kind of hook your understanding on. And it's kind of like I know, for example, if I'm looking at Mercury and I start talking about Venusian things, that I've gone way off. I absolutely know that that's inaccurate. And so there's astrological rules, and you can see how you're coming to the conclusions that you're coming to. I think the more deeply you go into astrology, the more deeply you're getting to know these archetypes of the psyche. So I think it helps. And there are also archetypes in the chart that talk about your own psychic capabilities. So like, Uranus is claircognizance. How do you suddenly know things without knowing how you know them? Or Neptune might be your, that feeling, that clairsentience. It dissolves the boundary between me and you. And, where Pluto is in your chart, that's like your psychological detective, kind of where you can see the hidden meanings of things. But the more you kind of meditate on and think about them, understand how they work through doing more and more charts and speaking to other people and seeing how do they materialize in their lives, I think kind of the astrology and the intuition comes together more and more and more.
Yeah. How amazing to be able to find out so much on the phone lines about whether this year is going to be a good year, or like I said before, about even if you don't understand how you're coming across or why you're maybe not drawing the right people to you, just, finding out basically your makeup of yourself and when's a good time to take action on certain things.
Absolutely. I think, and that's what astrology is. It's it's a sophisticated clock. So I think it is really, really good. I think we always have free will, but it's kind of like, I have free will, but on a Monday, maybe I'm going to be going to work. So it's like, how do I engage with it's not a Friday night party night time. I mean, that's a simplistic way of just describing it. But I think the timing that astrology gives is beautiful. I think as well, if, say, for example, what you're really wanting to manifest is love or career, but the chart can show where you're learning your lessons or maybe where you're tripping yourself up, that can be a good way of looking at how can you use what's going on for you now to achieve the goals that you want to achieve now.
And when to hold back on things. Sometimes you might be thinking, no, I really want to do it. I want to get it done. I want to go and do this and do that. And it's like, whoa, no, you really don't want to do that right now. And probably something that people have heard before, that Mercury retrograde often plays a part in causing havoc in people's lives. Just tell us a little bit about that and how it does impact people.
Sure. Okay. So astrology is a really subjective art. So say, for example, your astrology chart is describing life from your perspective. So when I look at your chart, I can tell you how you experience, say, for example, your mother and your father. But if I were to look at your mom and your dad's charts, I'd see something different. And maybe if I looked at your brother's chart, I'd see his experience of your mom and dad as maybe being different to how you experience them. Mm-hmm. And so from our perspective on Earth, it looks like the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west. Of course, we know that we're traveling around the sun, hurtling around it through the universe. But from our perspective, as we're looking at the heavens, it sometimes looks like the planets are always going forward. The stars, they're always going forward. But because we're moving at different speeds, it sometimes looks like a planet is going backwards. So that's what Mercury retrograde is. It looks like Mercury's going retrograde, but he isn't. He's going forward. And there's an idea that when he goes retrograde, all the sorts of things that comes under Mercury can go wrong. So that's anything to do with communication and the devices that we use to communicate. So telephones, computers, writing equipment, our pens, paper, travel. It can be cars, planes, booking trips, contracts, all those sorts of things. There can be glitches and delays. My personal perspective on that, and I mean, the way kind of this came to me was once I was going on holiday when Mercury was retrograde. And as I'm walking to my own car, I passed a guy and he was teaching he had a flat tire and he was teaching his two boys to change this tire. So that's all stuff of Mercury. Teaching comes under Gemini, two boys comes under Gemini, Mercury rules Gemini. The car comes under Mercury, and then the flat tire is like a typical something's gone wrong, that's Mercury retrograde. So I just kind of looked at that, and I already didn't really believe in Mercury retrograde, so I kind of rolled my eyes at the thought that this is a Mercury retrograde thing. But I went off on my trip and I was driving all over the place, and in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, I got a flat tire. And, my car needs a certain device to change the tire, and I didn't have it in the car. Oh, no. I ended up having to call somebody out to tow me somewhere. I waited for hours and hours. It ended up being expensive. It was just a bit of a nightmare. And I started to think, hang on, that was a synchronicity. If I had paid attention to that guy changing the tire at the beginning and showing those children how to do it properly, I might have thought, hang on, stop, check, are you prepared? How is your spare tire? Do you know how to change your own tire? And maybe I would have paid better attention on the road and I wouldn't have got the flat tire to begin with. But I just think sometimes these things, they can actually be the ways that a loving universe is communicating with us. It happened again shortly thereafter. I'd sent this long email to somebody and they wrote back saying their computer had crashed a gazillion times while they were reading my email. And that meant that they really understood what it was that I was trying to say. So of course, it's irritating when these things go wrong. It is irritating. But if we can just pause and go, hang on, is this the time when maybe, consciousness isn't going outwards, it's coming inwards from the world to us? What is the world, which is loving, what is the world trying to say?
And how often do we have a Mercury retrograde? Is it quite frequently? I feel like there might have been one recently because I've had loads of things break in my house and trailer and bike. I think in the space of a week, my son's tire went flat. My tire went flat on my bike. Then my husband's car wheel went. He had a flat tire, and then my trailer tire went. All those signs of us to slow down, probably.
Did that happen this week?
I think it was the week before.
That's so interesting. So here you go. So I'm telling you a story about flat tires. Now you've got a story with about 4 flat tires in the space.
Yeah, we couldn't believe it.
So there's definitely a connection or a link there. If I were you, I would absolutely take that to be the world is communicating with you. It's not trying to disrupt you. Mercury goes retrograde about 3 times a year.
Okay.
We are in Mercury retrograde at the moment. It went retrograde, I think it was the 25th of November, so just a few days ago. Yeah. But kind of say for example, if Mercury goes retrograde, say for example, between 0 and 10 degrees of a sign. So that means at 10 degrees it turns backwards and it goes to 0. In the period before that, when it's going from 0 to 10, and then again the period afterwards when it goes from 0 back up to 10, it's called a shadow period. So it's kind of themes of the same nature are also happening. Yeah.
Really interesting. So, I mean, will you always incorporate astrology into a reading, or do you sometimes have other areas or other skills that you use when you speak to people?
Yeah, I mean, with people usually call with a specific purpose and question in mind. So what I tend to do is I use the tarot cards to build that bridge and to kind of show me the story around what it is that they're asking about. If they give me their birth date at the beginning of the reading, I pop that in my astrology software. So I've got it open and I can glance at it as like a broader perspective, but it's really the cards I'm using to look at the story of their specific question. And then, I can tune in with my guides if they then want to hone in even more specifically. So for that, I use shamanic journeying. So listen to the drum to kind of alter the state of consciousness, whiz off to my guides in my mind's eye, ask them a question, and then come back with the answer.
Oh, wow. I mean, what was that? Did you say that
again? So shamanism, it rests on consciousness and the idea that, we've got this normal, ordinary state of consciousness, which you and I are in at the moment. So a consensual reality will both go away with some sort of similar story as to what's just transpired now. But there are also many other states of consciousness. So, for example, when you dream, that's personal to you, isn't it? But your dreams have a very real impact on your life, and they can have a greater or a lesser impact depending on how much you work with them. But just like you've got, so this state, your dream state, there's also a shamanic state of consciousness. So you can intentionally change your state of consciousness to connect with your spirit guides that you meet while you're there and you develop relationships with, just like we develop relationships with people in ordinary reality. And they are considered to be divine, loving, compassionate, and they're outside of time and space. So they know everything. But it's kind of like having a waking dream. So, get answers, but those answers can be in dream imagery, symbols that just like your dream imagery and symbols can be metaphoric and take time to unfold and can shift and shape their meaning through time. It's a similar sort of concept.
So all these tools are adding just more layers to a reading. The more tools you have, the more you can find out about people.
Yeah.
Interesting. Have you got? So is astrology your favorite, or have you got other tools that you use?
I would say of everything, shamanism is my favorite because
Okay.
it's kind of, in the shamanic world, everything is alive and it has spirit. So in that sense, then all the archetypes, all the planets, I interact with them as if they have spirits, as if they're alive. So it's a real relational way of engaging with the world around you. So absolutely, it's not just a piece of paper or a picture that I look at. It's something you interact with, and it means these archetypes are living and they evolve and they change and they can have it just puts so much more meaning and spirit into everything. So yeah, shamanism for me is the absolute favorite, and it's particularly because it's about empowerment and it's about finding the most healing story, helping us to become more in balance with ourselves and increasingly more whole, increasingly expressing what it is that we're all uniquely here to express. So it fits most with my passions.
And how does one person do that? How do you become more whole? How do you become more balanced? How have you been able to work on that throughout the years?
Oh gosh, how to become more whole? I think at the thrust of it, it's about self-discovery, getting to know yourself. So, I mean, we've all had loving parents, and well, I can't say we've all had, but say, for example, people have brought us up in a certain way with certain values and certain philosophies, and that may have been with the best of intentions, but it may not always necessarily be exactly aligned with what it is that we're here to do and what we want to do. So it's about learning to tune into the self, to listen to the self and see what's in your own heart, and then coming to express that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's a little bit like parenting, isn't it? Sometimes your parents thought they were doing the best for you, but then when you have children, you think, actually, I'm not going to force my children to have that last Brussels sprout because I hated it as a child.
And then when your child grows up, they'll go, why didn't you make me have that Brussels sprout?
Exactly. So no, I totally get that. Over the years, have you ever felt hard to fit in being psychic and working with astrology? Have people always been accepting of it, or have you sometimes come across people that haven't maybe appreciated what you do?
I think, it's an interesting question because I've in my sort of day job, I've always kind of worked as an independent contractor, and then whenever I go where I'm going, which it's not a psychic world, I'm pretty open, I'm transparent, I share who I am, so they get to know that I do have these interests, and I've never had any issues or problems with it. Somebody once said, that's so fascinating, you're so evidence-based and yet you believe in all this
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
But so in that regard, I've never had an issue. Where I do feel nervous about it is kind of, particularly in our Western society, putting it out there as who I am and what I believe in before people get to know me.
Yeah.
But I'm increasingly trying to work through that and get over that, because I also have some sort of a fundamental belief that maybe as soon as I'm 100% comfortable with it, there won't be any issue with me putting it out beforehand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, is there still more that you can learn personally, or do you feel you're at the peak of where you can be?
I'm learning every day, all the time. I must do about 10-15 shamanic journeys a day, asking questions about things,
Oh,
and I'm
wow.
constantly learning.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
where do you see this? Where do you see this going? Where do you want to get to?
I think my ideal dream is just to, where do I want it to get to? I mean, where I'm at my happiest is if I feel, oh gosh, that's such a question. Because I think it's just, I like feeling as though through conversation with people, I've helped to empower people, or for people to see the truth of their own power. And if that reach could expand, that would make me really, really happy. But then, just and if say, for example, if I were to impact your life in a positive way, that would make,
Yeah.
that's happy. So
Yeah.
it's difficult to say. I think it's just about doing what feels authentic in the moment, and hoping that I'm contributing towards something that's for the benefit of us all, in whatever way that is.
Yeah, that's great. Absolutely. So we talked a lot about obviously the astrology side of things and people's birth charts. Is obviously people can find out a little bit about them specifically on the phone lines, but is there sort of more of a general like yearly, like this year's going to be good for careers, or this year's going to be good for home life, this year's going to be good for relationships? I mean, what year are we in at the moment, and where are we going next year? Just so I can take some notes.
So what the year will be good for in terms of areas of life, that does depend. That is quite unique. It's personal. It's down to your time of birth. That looks at the different areas in your life. In general, we've just had the planet. So there are planets that are also kind of speak to the collective, and they're Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune. And we've just had the planet Pluto change sign. So it moved out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. So when Pluto was in Capricorn, Capricorn rules kind of structures, traditions. So things like governments are big institutions that kind of govern our reality. And as soon as Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008, we had the huge financial crises that kicked off, and governments had to bail out banks, and there was a whole lot of stuff going on there. Then in 2020, when Pluto came and met with the ruler of Capricorn, which was Saturn, that's when COVID started, and that changed all our realities, didn't it? And government was in the spotlight for how they were handling that. So Pluto is huge transformation. So while it was in Capricorn, it was transforming our reality in that sense. As it moves into Aquarius is the people, it's humanitarians, it's the collective. So, I mean, the short would be power to the people. I think the chart for the moment that Pluto went into Aquarius holds the potential for how it unfolds over the next 18 to 20 years or so, because at the tail end, it's going to dip in and out of Pisces. So it's going to be there for 18 to 20 years. And for me, that chart, I mean, different astrologers will put different emphasis on it, but for me that chart told the story of the Oracle of Delphi. So these were women in ancient times who they would merge with the sun god Apollo, and then people would come and they'd take their questions to these Pythia, and they would answer those questions, and their answers had extraordinary political influence, because it was both local and foreigners that would come and ask these questions. So to me, having that chart tell the story of the Oracle of Delphi, so Apollo, the sun god, that's the sun. So our true selves, our authentic selves, it's about really reconnecting with each and every one of us, reconnecting with who we are. And then if you think in those days, women, they didn't have the freedom of speech. Yet these women who were connecting with Apollo, they could speak, and everyone came to hear what they had to say. So it's about where people may have felt disempowered, or where power was out of reach for them, through being authentic to themselves. And everybody's going to have to find out for themselves what that authenticity is, but being able to be way more powerful than they've ever been before in their lives. I think a lot of people as well are speaking about how the role that artificial intelligence may come to play, and that is very Pluto in Aquarius as well. It could really be transformational for the consciousness of the collective, and I hope it's in an empowering way for everyone.
Yeah, because it's there for a long time.
It is there for a long time, but then we're going through unprecedented, extraordinary changes over the next kind of couple of years, just because. So Pluto changes signs. And you got to think, Pluto takes 248 years to go all the way around the chart. So when he changes signs, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
The next slowest one is Neptune, who will be moving from Pisces into Aries in 2025, 2026. Next year as well, we've got Uranus changing signs from Taurus into Gemini. So that's the three outer planets all changing signs in a very, very short space of time, and you know that never happens. You know, their changes don't coincide so quickly. So I think lots of change, and the biggest thing I would say is, you know, if you've always felt that something was out of reach, that it was impossible, just hang on, just wait, because you know, you've never seen a change like this. You've never had this change available to you before.
Amazing. Even just from what you're saying, even just relating to my own life about, you know, the power to the people and that freedom. I used that sort of freedom word even just the other day, because during lockdown, I changed and went into more of a different area of work, into more massage therapy and working in a spa. Prior to that, I was more into my fitness, presenting, being a personal trainer. And I've done that for quite a few years. I've just recently got another job working in a gym. And I said to somebody the other day, I said, as much as I love doing massage therapy and I will still continue to do it, I do feel that I'm not able to express myself as much. I feel I want to have a bit more freedom and to get myself back out there, back into the performing element where I'm part of a team and, you know, doing these classes, which I haven't done for such a long time, because I just, during that lockdown, just lost my passion for it. And suddenly that passion has now come back. And I've got that nice balance of doing the massage therapy where I'm giving and caring for people. And then I've also got that other element where I feel a bit more free and being able to perform a bit more and doing what I used to love, which is nice. Quite related to what you mentioned.
Amazing. And, you know, teams, classes, groups, that's all very, very Aquarian. So where do you come together as a group for a purpose? And that's going to be the platform for a lot of transformation for people. So it would be interesting to see, where does Aquarius fall in your chart?
Yeah. I mean, after this conversation, I'm going to be looking it up.
After this conversation, I am going to have to ask you what sun sign you are. I have to know.
What do you think I am?
Gosh. Ooh. I mean, you're obviously so. I mean, you've given a few clues away through being embodied. That kind of embodied physical work makes me think of an earth sign. But you come across, oh gosh, I don't know, air sign, Scorpio. You're obviously a gifted communicator, but then there's also something a little bit Leo about you. Gosh, I actually don't know. What are you?
Well, my moon is Scorpio, but I'm actually a Cancerian, hence why I like doing the massage and the caring and looking after people. I think my Mars is Virgo, I think, if I remember rightly, from many years ago.
You must have air somewhere in your chart, because you are very articulate.
Yeah, I can't. Well, maybe I've worked hard on that.
And you know, that's a really good point, because, you know, when we look at a chart, we look at the balance of the elements, but just because you don't have something doesn't mean that you can't have it. So say, for example, Bill Gates, he's got absolutely no air in his chart whatsoever, but where you've got nothing, you can overcompensate to the where you, I mean, nobody would say he's not intelligent, right? So setting off the Microsoft company. So you can really do extraordinarily well where you don't have something.
Absolutely. And I think, like you said, and that's again what a chart will do. If you feel that you're lacking in something, maybe you just work harder to make yourself, you know, get better in that area of your life where it's communicating or things like that. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. I mean, I find it absolutely fascinating. I think there's so much you can, you know, talk about in this industry, especially with the astrology side of things. What would you like people to sort of take away from listening to you today? Anything that they can either put into practice themselves, or anything they need to be aware of over this sort of coming months and years ahead?
Oh, the main thing, I would say, to feel excited about the future and to embrace the change and see the opportunities that are there for them. When we're working with things to do with consciousness, so Pluto can bring up, you know, everything's got its positive side and its negative side. The negative side of Pluto can be fears, so bringing up the things that we're most afraid of. In the chart where Pluto went into Aquarius, there was only one house that is absolutely pure, and that's, I mean, absolutely empty. Nothing's in it. So to me, that looked pure. It's the house of Virgo, which is also the sign of purity. So to me, what that is saying is, it would be a really good habit on a daily basis, even just for 2 minutes if you can. I mean, you may already have a practice doing it for much longer, in which case it's great, carry on. But if you don't do it, just for a minute, for 2 minutes, connect to something that to you carries the meaning of innocence and purity. So maybe playing with a pet, playing with a child, going outside in nature. Just reset your mind on a daily basis, or reconnect to that side. It would be a really, really, really good practice. And if you do find fears coming up and things like that, again, just notice them, but, please don't think you're going to be stuck there, because Pluto is transformation and change, and about moving from that place of fear to power.
Incredible. Amazing. Well, of course, if you want to find out more, listeners, if you want to speak to Yvette, you can on Ask the Answer. So what is that important PIN number for them to be able to get through to you?
Oh, thank you very much. So I'm on 700259.
Yvette, it's been lovely to speak to you today. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your astrology knowledge with us today. It's been fascinating, but I'm sure there's so much more that people could find out by speaking to in person. So I will leave you to it, because I know you're a busy lady, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Adele. It's been lovely speaking with you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Ask the Answers podcast. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and save to your library. Remember, there are 100 psychic readers available on our website for readings 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To triple your credits on your first purchase, visit asktheanswer.com and click on the new customer offer banner.